When we left Esther last week, she is the new young queen of Persia, a Jewish woman able to pass as Persian because nothing about the way she looks or acts or speaks reveals her Jewish heritage. Separated from her own people, learning to find her way in this new place, Esther is required to obey the king's every wish on threat of death. Together, she and her adoptive father Mordecai do manage to save the king from an assassination plot, but this act goes mostly unnoticed. It is recorded in the Book of Records, but with nothing much changing as far as Esther and Mordecai are concerned. So here is Esther with no big plans, just living her life as best she can in this place, doing what seems right at the time, or sometimes just doing what she's told to do, living a secret identity, fearing for her life if her Jewish ancestry becomes known. And then the situation gets worse. The king's chief advisor, Haman, discovers the Jew Mordecai will not bow down to him in submission and honor. So thinking it beneath himself to personally harm Mordecai, Haman comes up with a political scheme to destroy all of Mordecai's people, who are cast as radically different from the Persians. Through his conniving and bribery, Haman's plan for genocide becomes the official royal policy. All Jews, young and old, including women and children, are to be annihilated and all of their goods plundered. The date is set, and all the Persian citizens are to prepare for the coming bloodbath. Mordecai, hearing the news, goes into mourning, tearing his clothes and putting on sackcloth and ashes. His loud wailing cry bears witness to his deep pain as he parades through the city to the entrance of the king's gate. As the news spreads, Jews throughout the land join Mordecai in deep mourning, lying on the ground in sackcloth and ashes, fasting, weeping, crying out in lament. Esther becomes overwhelmed with grief when she hears what her adoptive father is doing. So she sends clothing to Mordecai, but Mordecai refuses the clothing, choosing to remain with his people, sharing their plight. So Esther, away from her people in the king's court, apparently not knowing what is going on, sends an attendant to ask Mordecai, why is he behaving this way? Explaining the situation, Mordecai sends a copy of the decree of extermination to Esther, so she will know everything that has happened. And along with his message is Mordecai's plea to Esther, go to the king, make an appeal for the lives of all your people. When Mordecai's message arrives, the dangers surrounding Esther become real, imminent, looming. In her message back to Mordecai, Esther reminds him, anyone entering the king's court without being summoned by the king will be put to death. Only if the king points the golden scepter at me will my life be spared. Besides this, the king has not summoned me for 30 days. And Mordecai's reply back to Esther is daunting. Don't fool yourself into thinking just because you're in the royal palace, you will be the only Jewish person to escape. If you keep silent at such a time as this, liberation will come to our people from another source, but you and your family will perish. Mordecai ends with, who knows? You may have come into the royal court for just such a time as this. Esther sends back her reply to Mordecai, bring together all the Jewish people and fast for me. Do not eat or drink day or night for 3 days. My maids and I will fast also. Then I will defy the law and go to the king. And if I perish, I perish. In more recent times, another woman defied the law, another unjust law aimed at the destruction of her people. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give her seat near the front of the bus to a white man and then moved to the back of the bus, thereby becoming the catalyst for the Montgomery bus boycott. Some say when asked why she did this, Rosa Parks said she was tired. But her tiredness was not a fatigue after a long, hard day's work. Her tiredness had grown from years and decades and centuries of mistreatment of her people, recklessly abused, even exterminated, unless perhaps they served some economic purpose for the dominant white society. Rosa Parks remained seated illegally, tired of injustice and abuse. Now, we tend to get a picture of this woman as a meek, mild woman who had just had too much and refused to move at the end of a long day. But in her new book, At the End of the Dark Street, Wayne State African-American history professor Danielle McGuire paints a quite different picture of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was a principal player in an organized resistance movement for justice to secure and protect the human rights and dignity of black women who had been raped by white men. She helped launch campaigns for specific women, signed petitions, sent postcards, interviewed some of these women, and even moved one woman and her family to Montgomery. She helped investigate a myriad of these cases taken on by the Montgomery NAACP, and some of these women whose cases she helped investigate are still alive today. Rosa Parks was not a meek, mild woman who simply remained seated because she was tired. She was part of a movement, a pre-movement of sorts, on the behalf of black women, and according to McGuire, the Montgomery bus boycott actually was rooted in this very pre-movement of which Rosa Parks was such an important part. Rosa Parks, like Esther, lived in difficult and dangerous times. Like Esther, her people faced oppression and death. Like Esther, Rosa Parks was positioned to make a big difference for justice, though likely neither of these women really knew it in the moment. They were just doing what seemed right at the time. Like Esther, Rosa Parks put her own safety on the line, risking her very own life to save her people. And God's transforming power and love moved through these women and into the world to accomplish amazing things.